Hello, this is Amos with Backpacker Diaries, and I've got a special presentation for you this week. It's a little different than what I usually share here. Recently, I was interviewed by Birdshooter with the n2Backpacking podcast, and he gave me permission to share that long-form interview here on my channel. I did do some light editing, so if you want to hear the full version, I would encourage you to check out the n2Backpacking podcast, the episode that was published in late June 2018 here. And I'll post a link in the episode notes here. And without any further ado, here is Birdshooter's long-form interview of me on his podcast, n2Backpacking.
This is Steve Goodrich, known on the trail as Birdshooter, and this is n2Backpacking, a podcast for both hikers and backpackers.
Hello, backpackers. It's Birdshooter. And on episode 53 tonight, I speak with Amos from the Backpacker Diaries. You may have seen his YouTube channel, where he documents multi-day and multi-week backpacking trips that are well within the reach of most hikers. In his videos, Amos does a great job of bringing the trail to your living room. And we're going to zero in on a recent trip that he took on the Sawback Trail. The Sawback Trail is a 74-kilometer or 46-mile backcountry trail. It's located near Banff in the Canadian province of Alberta and within Banff National Park. It passes many high alpine lakes with phenomenal views and is less crowded than many of the other Banff trails, offering backcountry hikers a great deal of solitude. In the show, we discuss permits, campsites, wildlife, insects, and weather. As a bonus, Amos talks food. He's a professional chef and has some great suggestions for your next backcountry adventure. So listen in and add a new backcountry trail to your wish list. Here's episode 53.
This is Birdshooter. I'd like to welcome Amos Prudhon from the Backpacker Diaries to the show. He has a YouTube channel that documents numerous and interesting short and long distance hikes in the U.S. and Canada, and is also a professional chef. So if you are lucky, you might even get some tips on tasty and lightweight backcountry meals. Amos, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Birdshooter. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, and you're sitting in a car doing an interview, I guess where you're near Fish Lake National Forest, is that right?
Yeah, I'm on the border of Fish Lake National Forest here. So yeah, that's where I'm at tonight.
Yeah, and Fish Lake is in Utah, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, you can kind of think of it as being south central Utah. So it ends up being about an hour northwest of Capitol Reef. So it's, as far as the Utah destinations go, it's actually a shorter drive from Salt Lake City than the drive to any of the national parks here. But yeah, it's a place where I did some backpacking a little over a year ago, and really enjoyed it. Really stuck out as a memorable trip. So I feel fortunate to be living and working here this summer. The shoreline trail that goes all the way around the lake here, but a number of other trails that are up high that I think it gets up over 11,000 feet, not too far from the lake. So when the rest of southern Utah is uncomfortably hot during the summer months, it's places like Fish Lake that become, a nice destination for backpacking in that sense also, with temperatures that are hardly ever above the mid 80s Fahrenheit. So yeah, it's nice and comfy here.
Well, it sounds like a hidden little gem for those that are from outside of Utah. Are you from Utah originally?
No, I'm actually from the Seattle area. Bellevue, Washington is on the east side of Lake Washington. So I came out here initially for the Olympics, or to Utah in general, initially for the Olympics back in that winter of 2001, 2002, just to check out the skiing and be around the sort of excitement that the Olympics bring. Yeah, it's a great place to be for those who are happy to do the sort of hospitality work that has the shoulder seasons in between to go on various adventures. And Utah certainly has, or the not just Utah, but the Intermountain West has a lot to offer in that respect.
Yeah, so to back to the Olympics, I was actually at the trials in Deer Valley for the aerial event in the Olympics. The people that would actually make the Olympics that year, and so that would have been
Oh yeah.
that was it was held New Year's Eve. So the Olympics that year were 2002. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was not far away. I was in Park City that winter working on the other side of Deer Valley. I don't know if you had a chance to explore Deer Valley at all, but the Olympics were held and some of the other competitions are still held at the base lodge there called Snow Park Lodge. And then there's kind of a mid-mountain lodge called Silver Lake Lodge where I was working both winters I was there.
Yeah, and that whole experience was amazing. I can very much understand why you want to be there for the Olympics. Of course, Atlanta had it in 1996, and Atlanta exploded after the Olympics. I'm sure your area did as well.
Did you get to check out the Atlanta games also?
Yes, I did. I actually moved to Atlanta the very day that the Atlanta Olympics ended. And that was after I did a cross-country road trip for about 2 or 3 months. But you couldn't find housing in Atlanta. I was getting ready to go to grad school here. And so I couldn't move until the Olympics basically were ending because there was nowhere to live. I mean, even people that lived here were renting their houses out. So it is, I mean, to your point, right? To be a participant in the Olympics is really, it's exciting, right? To be there when it's all going on, especially if you're not just there for a couple days, if you're there for the whole thing. But anyway.
Indeed. Now, I was working most of the time, but I did have a couple of days to, of course, as an employee of the resort, I had some ski privileges. So I do remember going to ski over in that area near Snow Park Lodge where those events were being held. And I remember having to go through metal detectors. They had near where the St. Regis Hotel now is located. They had a tent set up with metal detectors because this wasn't that long after 9/11, right? So security was on high, and that was kind of an unusual thing, having to have the wand waved over you while you're in all your ski gear. But yeah, I did get to see Johnny Mosley do his dinner roll about a mile away.
Yes, that's right. He got the gold that year, correct?
I'm not sure how he medaled, but that was exciting. I mean, I probably should have brought binoculars. I would have had a better, vantage point.
I was actually standing at the very base where they were landing. It was unbelievable. I mean,
wow.
Yeah, the courage it must take to do that. But I don't want to get completely off track, but I should ask you though, because I saw some of your videos, and I noticed you spend a lot of time. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of time, but you have what I thought were extremely interesting videos of snowshoeing into the backcountry and some of the yurts that are in Utah. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Because I really enjoyed those videos. That to me, especially being an East Coast guy that doesn't get all the snow and doesn't get that kind of scenery, that looked super fun to me.
Indeed, yeah. Well, it all kind of started with a hiking buddy of mine named Inga who has some yurt experience, and leading into that winter, we were kind of talking about, hey, we should get a group of friends together to go, check that out. There's happens to be a organization called the Utah Nordic Alliance, or the acronym is spelled tuna, so people call it the tuna yurt. But anyway, it's up there. Yeah, it's up there towards the Uintas off of Mirror Lake Highway. So this would be east of Park City. And in any case, it's a yurt that's available to members. And yeah, on top of the membership, they have, I think, different pricing for midweek versus weekend. And the year after I did it, which was just, like the winter of 2017, they implemented like an additional step where you have to be somehow like certified or trained to use it, something like that. And I haven't, or for people that haven't used it before. So that's not something that I've done yet, but maybe personally, I would still be able to get in there, seeing as how I've used it before. But since I've let my membership lapse, I don't know whether I'd be, welcome to do that or not. But so yeah, it is something that is available to the general public if they pay the membership fee, and I guess jump through a couple other hoops. There are other yurts in Utah that I have yet to try, some of which book up, I guess, right when they become available. I mean, even on Airbnb, if any of your listeners are keen on Airbnb, I know I remember seeing one there for rent in like the Soldier Summit area south of here, kind of on the way to Price, or central Utah. But yeah, as far as that experience goes, yeah, it was a real treat. It was set up really well with both propane and a wood stove. We didn't use the propane at all, but we really enjoyed being able to use the wood stove to melt snow and make water that we could then filter, and being as how it was just a single night trip, we were able to, travel a little more luxuriously as far as bringing, full on, whole foods that weren't dehydrated and stuff like that. I know that I've been just reading other trip reports of the tuna yurt that's if people can afford to take a couple of nights there, then you get to have, that sort of 0 day to explore and do more backcountry adventuring, which would be great to do someday. I don't know if this past winter would have been the best year to do it since we had a lighter snow year out west here. But yeah, we certainly felt fortunate that snow was in pretty good condition both times actually. This particular tuna yurt that you're asking about that I share on my channel there, it has enough people for 8 to fit, but realistically, I think 4 adults would probably be the sort of comfortable maximum, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it looks like you guys had the place to yourself, right? You didn't have to. I mean, you basically reserve it. You get the night. It looked like you guys spent a couple nights there, from what I could tell in the video. Is that true?
Yeah, in our case, it was just the one night in both cases. I think I spent a night there in February with a party of 4, and then again in late March, actually, with just a party of 2. And yeah, in both cases, it was just a single night, but still, you can, it's still very worthwhile just with the single night. And the nice thing about Utah is that there will be these sort of weather windows, these sort of dry and warm spells where even as early as March or maybe February, there's conditions are great for doing backpacking down south. So it's another nice benefit of being in Utah to enjoy that type of thing, even during the winter months.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you because I watched a number of your videos and I noticed in some cases you travel solo, but in some cases you travel with others. What is more? What do you do more frequently, just out of curiosity? And I appreciate the enjoyment of both situations. So just curious.
Indeed.
Yeah, how that breaks out for you.
Indeed. Well, I would say that probably as much as 90% of my trips are solo, and it's definitely a different type of thing. And yeah, while I enjoy it both ways, it's kind of a symptom of just having these weird stretches of time off, and having just not knowing that many people that have my same schedule. And there are times when it might be like a short notice. Oh, all of a sudden I have 3 days off, in the middle of the week. And I'll put it this way. I've never been one to have the solo aspect discourage me from going. I'm very comfortable traveling alone, and I'm well set up with my podcast to keep me company. And and I have my solo. What is it? The tent that I use, the REI quarter dome, I think, that is the perfect size for one person and light enough to not be too much of a burden. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable both ways. That said, I just got off the trail yesterday from an overnight trip with a friend of mine in the Wasatch Range. That was a real treat. It was the first time I had company on a backpacking trip in a while. So really enjoyed, of course, having that company as well.
Are you saying that you may have actually listened to an n2Backpacking podcast in the backcountry? Is that what you're telling me, Amos?
Yes, I can confirm absolutely that I've been listening to I think I'm pretty well caught up on all of your episodes, unless there's a recent one that I haven't listened to yet. But
Not
yeah,
not
I can.
not until this one comes out.
I guess not. I guess not. But yeah, you're definitely one of my favorites, Birdshooter. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to produce these.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I really enjoyed looking at your videos through the Backpacker Diaries, which we should talk about now. Hey, so let's talk about your series for a second. It's on the YouTube channel, which I think the Backpacker Diaries is a appropriately named title because that's exactly what it is. So you have 5 seasons now, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm working my way through the 5th season, and basically every season had been like within a calendar year except for seasons 4 and 5. Last year, 2017 was an especially long season for me because I basically skipped the summer job and just went on like an extended sort of section hike of the Appalachian Trail. And with that, I decided to split 2017 up into 2 seasons. But yeah, I do intend to have season 6 be this current year that we're in, like whatever adventures I'm enjoying at the moment. Yeah, I plan on putting together in a season 6.
Yeah, and what section, just out of curiosity, on the Appalachian Trail did you hike?
My buddy from North Carolina, actually, he had finally found the time to go, and I kind of, I guess, artfully invited myself along because I had done some various other backpacking trips with him, and we started from Pawling, New York.
Okay.
Because we started like just I think a year ago last week. So yeah, June 15th. And then that's a great place to start, for a mid-June, sort of launch. And it's really convenient to fly into New York City and then take the train north up to Pawling.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, I ended up making it to Gorham, New Hampshire. So almost into Maine, but not quite. I would love to go back and, complete Gorham, New Hampshire, northbound. So at least I can say I've, done the New England section, and also because I've heard, incredible things about the Maine section with the 100-mile wilderness and whatnot.
Yeah, phenomenal. I love Maine in general. Actually, the whole New England section was my favorite, for the record.
Indeed. I've been pretty good about cherry picking, small pieces of the Pacific Crest Trail as well. So I guess for those that aren't quite as ambitious as a thru hiker, cherry picking as a section hiker is pretty good. But that said, the 440 miles of that stretch, I guess that comprises 20% of the trails. There were some tough parts with the mud of Vermont and maybe some other sort of, buggier sections of Connecticut, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it was a great experience. My first, long trail experience. As you know full well, it's a very social trail, so that's an excellent feature of the AT as well, of course.
Yeah, and one of the things I really liked about your videos, you're really good about kind of pumping out a concise 8 to 10 minute sort of piece that introduces you to a hike. It gives you a kind of feeling for the trip. I really liked a lot of the editing that you did there. So I'd like to zero in on a specific trail, if you don't mind, because Sawback Trail in Banff National Park. That to me looked like, let's be honest. There's a lot of people that listen to this show. There's a lot of people in general that just don't have the time to take 6 months off. It's just not doable for a lot of reasons. But the Sawback Trail looked within reach for a lot of people. Is it about 50 miles? Is that right?
Yeah, it's something like 74 kilometers, which comes, just short of 50 miles. And I took a little longer to do it than other people typically do. I've heard of people doing it at over 3 and 4 nights. I did take a 5th night because I had the time. I do tend to travel at a more leisurely pace than like a typical thru hiker, that's pumping out 20 miles or more a day. So yeah, I was fine with stretching it over 5 nights, getting to see maybe a little more, or just travel. You take more of a leisurely pace, you might say.
Yeah, and with the Backpacker Diaries, you have a lot of very good videos, but I especially liked the Sawback Trail because it's a place that I haven't been that I'd love to go. And you did this trail last fall in August of 2017, is that correct?
Yeah, and it actually wrapped up on September 1st. So it was kind of, the tail end of August going into, September 1st, correct.
And for the listeners, this is near Lake Louise, which is a ski area in Banff, Alberta, Canada. Um,
Yeah,
it's all within Banff National Park. Is that fair to say?
that's correct. And there are people that'll do it northbound. They'll start at a place called Mount Norquay. It's a ski resort that's on the north side of the town of Banff. I definitely came across people going northbound and, wrapping up the trip at Lake Louise there, as well as going southbound.
Yeah, and did you spend any time in the town of Banff at all, or were you pretty much just there to backpack and you were gone?
Well, I was on a family sort of reunion of sorts that we had in Canmore, which, as you may know, is next door to Banff. And yeah, if I remember correctly, the only real time I spent in Banff was going to get my permit for the backpacking. And it was, at least last year, I maybe the rates may have changed for this year, but basically it was about $10 Canadian, mind you. So these are Canadian dollars, but yeah, they end up costing about $10 for the application or the registration, and then $10 a night thereafter. And I'm not sure if that's per campsite or per person, because it was all the same to me as a solo trip. But it ended up running about $60, which is less costly than I've heard about other trails in Canada. I forget what the trail is called on Vancouver Island.
Oh God, that's a great one. That is I think it's called the West Coast Trail.
Yeah, something like that. And that one's even more costly than that. But
and for the listeners,
case,
for the listeners quickly, the West Coast Trail is an old shipwreck trail. So when the ships would wreck in the 16, 17, 1800s, there was this trail that was built for anybody that crashed on the shore to get out, and then over time it was used for other reasons. But I've always wanted to do that one as well. Another really interesting Canadian trail that is on my list when I start getting more time. I actually made it to Banff in 1998, and we intended to hike in the very area that you were in, and we ended up doing a multi-day float trip for fishing on some of the rivers there, and we ended up spending a bunch of time in town and had a great time. But it is an absolute beautiful area. And by the way, that 1998 trip can be heard in a previous podcast, one of the summer road trips. But I fully appreciate why you would want to go to that area. It's phenomenal.
Well, it must be an amazing place for a float trip. I'll have to look up that podcast episode you're talking about.
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed in your hiking, there are definitely times where you're in the trees, but there's lots of lakes and there's lots of open hiking where you can see for miles and miles. Now I guess you get that in Utah too, but that had to be a great experience for you when you were hiking through there. And did you have a chance to do any fishing? Was the other question that immediately came to mind when I was watching your videos.
No, I didn't bring a pole, and I'll admit that I'm not much of a fisherman, which is strange for somebody who's living and working where I'm at here, because it's such a popular fishing area. But I've tried fishing a couple times over the years, just with friends as like a social thing, and I don't know, it just didn't appeal to me so much. I mean, I guess I'm carrying enough other weight, enough other gadgets and doodads that I'm happy to not have to carry a pole with me, because I tend to set up myself pretty well with the dehydrated meals and probably more snacks than I need. So from a food standpoint, I'm pretty comfortable as well.
Yeah, and I want to come back to your dehydrated meals because as a professional chef, I watched some of your videos. I was impressed with the meals that you packed. So I definitely want to talk about that, but I just wanted to finish on the Sawback because it fascinated me. And I'm secretly building this list of trails that I want to do through my life, right? And this definitely made my list. You compare the Sawback to the Glacier National Park. I'm just kind of curious to get your I mean, because I've been to Glacier, I haven't been to the Banff National Park like you have. How do you? Can you just give us a few kind of takeaways between the two?
Well, I found that the permitting was less of a hassle at Banff. Maybe that particular trail was in less demand than the places I've been in Glacier. I mean, the permitting system itself is a little more restrictive, you could say, with basically at Glacier, you pay for a reservation that's non-refundable, by the way. If they grant you your permit, then that fee is non-refundable. And then you have to go there in person, and your reservation's not the same as having the permit, right? You have to show up and pick up your permit up to a day in advance of when you're blast off, when you're going into the backcountry. So what can happen and that happened to us last year too, is the backcountry office can basically close the backcountry in a way that basically you don't get your money back, and you have to find some other option, which my uncle and I fortunately did. We were able to do some day hiking nearby and then show up the next day, and we're fortunate enough to still get a route that worked for us rather well, actually. So that's not something that happens in Canada. They don't limit it. They're not as restrictive in that sense. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I was able to get my permit like earlier in the week. I don't know, 3 or 4 days in advance. And then, with that permit in hand, I was allowed to go in, I guess, at my own risk, regardless of the conditions. Let's see, what are the other differences? I know that the huckleberries, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it actually is yeah.
I noticed I noticed it was a big deal for you in the video. You were extremely excited about the huckleberries in the video.
Yeah, well, once you taste them, after chugging up, a huge gain of the thousands of feet or whatever, it's a real nice, treat that Mother Nature can provide there. And so admittedly, I went on a rampage a couple times with where my fingers turned blue, and I was just kind of like probably having more than my fair share at both of those, both Glacier and Banff. It wasn't until after that happened that I met somebody who worked for the Park Service, staying at the ranger cabin there on the last night. I asked him, so what is the policy? And he said, well, here in Banff, we save our berries for the wildlife. So, yeah, with that, I kind of learned after the fact, after the damage was done, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the terrain looked amazing there. How do you compare to the views and the lakes, and how do you compare that to Glacier?
Well, what's it called? Hole in the wall, that area between Boulder Pass and Brown Pass in Glacier. I mean, there's a really good reason that my uncle has gone back. I think that was the 4th time he was there. The trip that I profiled from August of last year. I mean, it's pretty exceptional scenery and the sort of landscape and cloudscapes that sort of can enhance that, along with the campsite there at Hole in the Wall. It's pretty special. It's but yeah, again, it's higher demand. It's more difficult to get. I mean, my uncle had to plan ahead. Well, actually, I guess that was the permit that we lost. But I guess I really just got lucky on my way back. I mean, I guess the other strategy one can take to book the more desirable campsites is to show up, up to a day ahead, and just have that be towards the end of the route, right? Whatever the desirable campsite is, whether it's Hole in the Wall at Glacier, or what's it called at Mount Rainier. There's one called Indian Garden that's exceptionally difficult to get for similar reasons. But if you put that towards the end of your route, if it's like, on night number 5, 6, or 7, or whatever, you're going to increase your odds of getting it it's less likely that others have been able to book it that way, so far out. So I guess that's another strategy to sort of maybe get the most out of the permitting. So you're asking me to compare, like, kind of choose a favorite between Glacier and Banff, or do you just trying to use that for like a comparison of the scenery?
I'm kind of curious of both, actually. You know, I mean, if you had to pick between the two, what would you say?
Well, it really varies depending so much on what part of the park you're in. I mean, um, let's see. Yeah, from driving through there in the Banff area, or yeah, floating through there. I think you said also. I mean, it's just the ridge lines that are visible from the Trans-Canada Highway there. It's just so sort of grandiose and overwhelming, right? I mean, it's kind of like up in Canada there near Banff. It's kind of like the Grand Tetons, but then it just keeps going and going, right? The Canadian Rockies are really, a special sight to behold, and maybe you could say that for the entire, or for much of the Continental Divide scenery, at least, glacier northwards, right? But yeah, there's something about the Continental Divide that really makes for quite a rugged sort of aesthetic there with the jagged peaks. Yeah. My Canadian friend chose, I mean, after hearing my comparison, she thought that, yeah, Banff was preferable to Glacier. But
Yeah.
if you talk to my uncle, but if you talk to my uncle, I'm sure he would say, well, he'll take, that's the only place he ever backpacks anymore. So, yeah, he's ruled out all the other options. So as far as, I mean, I enjoyed both so much. It's pretty tough to pick a favorite. I mean, if my uncle invited me for, to join him again in Glacier, I would certainly, do my best to join him. But yeah, I would love to go back to Banff as well and see what's there. I mean, the trail system in Glacier, it seems maybe a little more like cared for. It's like they put more into the maintenance aspect of it. I mean, one thing about the Sawback Trail is that there was a section that was quite vague and sort of required some route finding chops. I mean, fortunately that it was also fairly close to a creek, or a drainage the whole time. So one, even without GPS or a map, one could just sort of listen for the creek and sort of manage that way. But yeah, it's tough to pick a favorite because I've enjoyed both so much. But
Now
yeah,
I mean, when you were on the Sawback though, you were dealing with forest fires, correct? And weren't you were alone though when in the video that I saw, your uncle was not with you, is
correct.
that correct? Yeah.
There was some degree of wildfire smoke at both parks last summer, at least during that latter half of August. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly where the smoke was coming from, but I know that British Columbia in particular got especially hard hit by wildfires, and I think that was a big factor with Glacier as well. I mean, a lot of the smoke that was blowing into Montana last year was coming from BC as far as I know. I wasn't close enough to see any flames anywhere last year, but yeah, certainly the smoke was evident in both.
Yeah, and it looked like it was impacting your hike, but not to the point that you had to get off the trail, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, maybe I was breathing a little more heavily, but to be honest, the wildfire smoke that I've had to breathe in places like Yosemite or the Ansel Adams Wilderness there, right next door, if you're familiar with the John Muir Trail, yeah, that the year I was doing a small little piece of that, yeah, it was much more intense, I guess you could say.
Yeah, one of the other things I noticed about the video was that you had some thermal features in there. I saw some ink pots, which I mean,
Oh
they're
yeah.
obviously you get down to a place like Yellowstone, they're frequent. But were those legitimate like thermal features, or were they not underground Yellowstone type activity? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, well, they weren't. I forget the temperature, but it's not like a hot springs. I think it's more of like a cold springs, or maybe just kind of a medium temperature springs. And it's something. I understand it's a feature that back in the old days that people would go and swim in there, and kind of wait around. But after enough time passed, it was determined, well, that's really not the best way to take care of these, spring features, because they look pretty aesthetically pleasing. So we should really and they have other value as well. So we should just not prohibit swimming in there so they're not just destroyed for the future generations. So that seems to have helped quite a bit. That was my first time I'd ever seen them, and from what I was told, it can be a very popular attraction with as many as like 150 people kind of gathering around during the sort of the middle of the day, in the high season. But another reason I guess to go at it from the north side, where in the evening, like I did, because I had it all to myself. It's pretty neat to get to enjoy that.
You want to tell the story about the drunk guy that hit you with the bear spray? Because I thought that was pretty funny.